Welcome to this chess endgame demonstration of the fortress. And so a fortress is a position where the defender may even be behind in pieces, and he sets up a blockade where the attacker cannot move into his position. Even if he has more material, the defender is able to just keep the attacker out of the position and hold him to a draw. And in this first example here, we see that in this position, the black king is just in the corner, and white would like to get rid of this pawn and press his forward, but this is impossible. So in this position, if the king tries to make headway, black just stays in the corner in this little fortress, and then we would have a draw here by stalemate. And so many times stalemate can be used in these fortress positions to obtain a draw. And if we go on to the next example here we see that white is even ahead of pawn, but once again black can move up into this defensive fortress here and barricade himself in, and if white tries to move forward, there is this stalemate possibility. Otherwise, white will just have to move back and forth and not be able to move into this position where black's king is hiding. And if we move on to another example here, as that loads, and here we see a position where white is trying to escort this pawn up to promotion on a8, but if we notice that the bishop here is on the dark squares, it is not able to assist by attacking this knight, attacking the king and driving it out of the corner here, as they're on opposite colored squares. And so, of course, if white would push his pawn forward, it would just be immediate stalemate. And so we may have a bishop move, and then the king, the defensive king, just moves back and forth in this corner here and prevents white from making any progress. And here, if we have check, the king just stays in this corner, and no progress can be made. Once again, if the pawn presses forward, we have immediate stalemate. Now, things would be different if white had a light squared bishop, which could then drive the king out of this corner and allow this pawn to press forward and promote. But with a opposite colored bishop of the queening square color, then it is impossible for white to make progress. And black basically uses white's pieces against him to create this little fortress in the corner. And now if we go on to the next example here, and here we see that white has a queen versus a knight and bishop, but still no progress can be made, as the black king has barricaded himself in this corner behind the bishop. So he protects the bishop, and the bishop protects the knight, but also this combo of bishop and knight prevent the white king from being able to move in to assist the queen, as the knight covers this light g6 square and the bishop covers the other squares. The king cannot aid the queen in attack here. And so this position, I invite you to just play it out on a board yourself and just see what the possibilities are. But as you play with this position, you'll notice that no progress can be made. If checks are made by the queen, the king can just maneuver down to h7, And then if the queen moves, the king can just remaneuver back in this corner. And so let me move on here to the next example. All right, and here we have black defending with a pawn and a rook, and we see once again black uses one of his pieces to keep the white king out of the attacking area where this king is barricaded himself in. And so the rook can just move back and forth from e6 to g6, preventing any headway by white. And if the queen attempts to check on the back rank, the king can just maneuver around this pawn, pushing forward up to g7 with the king, and no headway can be made once again. So here we see in this fortress where white has a material superiority, but he cannot make any progress. And the computer evaluation, of course, gives this a draw. And so if we go on to example number 6 here. And once again, we have another setup where the rook holds back white's forces, and it is protected by a bishop. And so, once again, white is ahead in material here, but cannot make any progress, because this rook does a good job of keeping the king back, stopping the pawns. If this pawn pushes forward, immediate capture. And then if this one tries to make progress, the rook can capture as well. And if there was a trade here, perhaps an immediate trade such as this, we could have capture and capture. And here, the king could just barricade this pawn while the bishop keeps an eye on this pawn here, even capturing, and no progress could be made. And so once again, the computer gives this evaluation a draw. And if we move on to the next example, number 7. Okay, in this position, the computer gives the advantage to black here. And here it says black is ahead by 2.5 pawns worth of material. But white has a tricky setup here. We see he has a fortress in behind all these pawns. And if the king moves here to b1, preparing to move over to the other side of the board, we have the king moving out of the way, attacking this rook, also allowing his rook to move over and take control of this h-file. And then white would be in trouble here. And so we have this rook to h6, giving up his rook, but this move prevents the rook on a8 from immediately moving to control the h-file. And so if the king captures, we have a king move, and now the king moves out of the way for the rook to take the h-file. The white king moves to the center, and finally the rook takes control of the h-file. But now we have this move, king to e2. And so the rook cannot move to h1 or it is immediate stalemate, as white has trapped himself in with the black pawns covering the d2 square, the e3 and f2 squares. And if the rook moved here on h1, the white side would have no possible moves and stalemate would result. So the game may play out with this move here attacking the pawn, the king would defend. But once again, if there's a check, the king can just move here, threatening stalemate once again. And if black changes his mind moving here, and after the protection once again sacrifices the rook, well then capture, and if the king moves in to help press this pawn forward, we just have a standard defensive measure by black, moving directly back from this pawn that's trying to make progress. And once the king moves to h3, h1 prevents the king from moving into the position. And after the pawn move, we would have a draw here. If the king protects the pawn, it's immediate stalemate. But if he moves back, capture, and then the king would have to move back. And then white could just move forward and hover around in this area without black being able to make progress, as this f3 pawn stops black from moving in here. And let's move on to the next example, number 8. So in this position, we see that the pawns are blockading each other. This bishop is stopping this pawn from moving forward, and of course all these pawns on this side are on the opposite color as the black bishop, and so no progress can be made. This fortress is created by the c4 and f4 pawns guarding these squares here, preventing the white king from moving into, or excuse me, the black king from moving into white's position. And here the bishop, even though it's on black side of the board, the only thing it could do is, possibly attack here, but white can just guard this pawn by moving back and forth, and no progress can be made with this fortress setup. And let me move on to the final example, number 9 here. And so this is a very tricky example, which I've saved for last. In this position, once again, the computer evaluation shows that black is winning. And we see here that black is ahead in material. It has a bishop, the bishop pair as well, and this knight is off on the edge of the board. And in this position, we have knight to b8, attacking the rook. And so the computer recommends that the best move by far is rook to d6, where it covers and traps this knight here, where all the squares that the knight could move to, are covered by the rook. But we have knight to d7 with check. And so once again, the computer recommends rook takes d7 by far compared to any other moves. And so after this capture, we have a rook capture here, giving up the rook for this dark squared bishop. And after the capture, this light squared bishop is closed in by its own pawns. And here, there's one move, this h4 move, which blocks in this pawn, or prevents this pawn from moving and blocks in the bishop. And now we have the rook moving down and preparing to try and control this g file here. But the king moves up, allowing check, and then jumps in to this hole here and threatens a stalemate. So the rook cannot come down here to g1 and attempt to move over and eat these pawns, as an immediate move to g1 would be stalemate. And so the rook is forced to move, and then the white king can just move back and forth here. If the rook attempts to jump in, then the white king can just move back to h3. So that was an interesting example where, once again, a stalemate threat is used in this fortress position to stop the attacking force, even when he has much more material. And so I found some of these fortress positions, especially with stalemate, to be very interesting. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. There are many fortress possibilities. These were only a few. And I hope you enjoyed them. If you've liked this video, please like and subscribe, and feel free to leave comments or suggestions. Thank you, and have a great day.